Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. We are here to talk with you about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night, broadcasting live on WBSM as well as on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. So if you want to see what's going on in the Spooky Studio during the show, just go to Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. There you can join in the chat room. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat room tonight. We got a packed house in there tonight. And they are all there because we are going to be talking about a great topic tonight. We're going to be talking about Iroquois Supernatural, Talking Animals and Medicine People. It's the new book by Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. And it's a good-sized volume, and I've been reading it for the past few weeks. And I got to tell you, it is fascinating to hear some of the stories about the paranormal and about the supernatural from the Iroquois Nation, and how much some of them are similar to what we talk about here with our local Native American population, and some of the differences between them as well. So we're going to talk about all that and more. I mean, if you thought Pukwudgies were just a Bridgewater Triangle phenomenon, well, maybe not. So we're going to be talking about all that and more with Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield in just a minute. We do want to remind you that next Saturday night will be Haunted History Night 2011 at the Fearing Tavern and a few other historical buildings in Wareham, Massachusetts. Tickets are still available. They're $99, but for that you get dinner. You get lectures from Jeff Belanger, Andrew Lake, the author of the new book, Ghost Hunting Southern New England, and myself. You get dinner prepared by the Spooky Crew, and we had a new add to the slate this past week. Spirit medium Tiffany Rice, who you've heard on the show many times, she will be there doing a mini gallery reading during dinner, and she's also going to join us for the investigation as well. So not only do you get to investigate, do you get to learn about these haunted locations and about the paranormal, but you may make a connection with someone who's passed on with spirit medium Tiffany Rice. And of course, we don't guarantee ghosts. We don't guarantee that you'll make a connection with the other side, but we do guarantee that you'll have a great time, and it'll be well worth the ticket price, $99. Like I said, there are still tickets available, and they're up on SpookySouthCoast.com. If you just click the Haunted History Night 2011 picture when you open up SpookySouthCoast.com, you can purchase the tickets right there through PayPal. If you are going to join us and you do want to buy tickets, please do so by maybe Wednesday or Thursday, so we can make sure we have an accurate dinner count. And then I don't think tickets will be available at the door, but it depends. We have to talk to the Historical Society and see how they feel about it. And it also depends on how many members they have coming. I've been told there's going to be somebody from the Historical Society that's able to work with each group as we break down into very, very small groups. I mean, you're not going to be in a room with 20 people here trying to investigate. You're going to be in a room with 5 people. And we're going to have a Historical Society volunteer there with every group to be able to answer any questions. So it's going to be a great learning experience. If you've never investigated the paranormal and you've always wanted to, you're going to get the chance to work side by side with seasoned investigators. So definitely check that out. But enough about that. We've got all night to talk about that. But we're going to talk about Iroquois Supernatural. And joining us on the line is Michael Bastine, an Algonquin healer, elder, and former student of famous Tuscarora medicine man Wallace Mad Bear Anderson and Tuscarora healer Ted Williams. He's joining us, as well as Mason Winfield, a supernatural historian, founder of Haunted History Ghost Walks Incorporated, and the author of 9 books, including Supernatural Saratoga. Both authors live near Buffalo, New York. And if they are Bills fans, then we're going to have to deal with that. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing great. This is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Really well. This is Mason. Thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks for joining us, and thank you for putting together this book, Iroquois Supernatural, because every year we've been doing this show now since January of 2006, and every year we want to explore the topic of Native Americans and their supernatural beliefs, and I hit a stone wall, no pun intended. I never seem to be able to get any of the local tribes anyway here in Wampanoag Nation to come on and talk about this. It must have been hard for you guys to get a lot of reports from the Iroquois Nation regarding some of these phenomena.
Well, this is Mike. It wasn't so difficult for me. I'm native, so it actually was quite simple. I just hooked up with Mad Bear about 30-some years ago and just observed, just kind of got comfortable in that space and watched how he interacted with this life and what the purpose of using the techniques that they've held on to since they've come together as a confederacy. So it really is very common amongst most native groups and tribes that they understood that from the concepts of what we perceive as the living, they really understood that beyond what we call the physical life, that there is another existence, and it is very real, and it is very important for us to acknowledge that and to interact with that throughout our time in the physical realm. So experiencing those things and getting to observe how they did ceremony, how they interacted, it really was intriguing that they did it with such ease and comfort, and there was not so much the fear factor that was brought into it, but they put people at ease. And it's not that everyone was able to do it. It's a few of the practitioners that understood this and were able to help those who weren't so comfortable with it.
And Mason, being someone who chronicles the supernatural in your area, these tales of the Iroquois Nation must have crossed your path just investigating some of the more modern-day ghost stories as well.
You know, that's really, really perceptive of you to pick that up. You're absolutely right. That's the way I got into this. I was noticing, I just started out researching the supernatural traditions of my region without paying any particular attention to which culture or society it was from. Mm-hmm. And, that's how I came across the Iroquois and their material, and the more I got into it, the more I realized what an untold story was there.
And when you mention frequently in the book that some of these tales, and this was pointed out by someone in the chat room, Hilly Rose, who has read the book, not the Hilly Rose, but Hilly Rose in the chat room, who's read the book, and he pointed out that many times a lot of these stories are mentioned that they're not really your stories to tell, and that you really shouldn't be sharing some of this information. Was a lot of that, Mike, secretive amongst the people, and you were kind of bringing it forward in the hopes that it could educate?
Absolutely. It's not so much secretive as that we get into certain areas which they deem sacred. Mm-hmm. And when you acknowledge sacred items, they're not entertained, they're not used for people's enjoyment. It's actually something that is done by those who specialize in those areas. I'm familiar with it. I know people in those societies. They don't openly talk about it. They will acknowledge if someone is seeking information like myself to get some insight to what might help in other situations, but this may contribute to assisting, they will talk about it, but they are very reluctant to, because they know that to not honor the sacredness of the elements that they are working with, they will lose this ability or this gift that they have developed. So as a result, they do share some, and I've known where those lines are not to cross. So I've shared what I could, and when sometimes it gets into an area, I usually just will say that's a place where we really can't go.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't we take a step back here, and here in the south coast of Massachusetts, we extend from Cape Cod to Rhode Island, and of course we do broadcast, internationally. We have people listening all over the world, but we've talked many times about our Native American culture here, about the Wampanoag Nation, the tribes that comprise that, and some of the history of King Philip's War and the things that went on here. Why don't you explain to people exactly what tribes made up the Iroquois Nation and a little bit about its history?
Okay, the Iroquois people, the name Iroquois is really not a nation, but it's a designation of 5 nations, currently now recognized as 6 nations, but they comprise the 6 nations of Tuscaroras, Senecas, Oneidas, Cayugas, Onondagas, and Mohawks. Now, they resided in primarily what is known today as New York State. They did extend little bit to the north and a little bit to the south, and their boundaries weren't exact, but they did occupy such a large territory that what makes them unique to all of the rest of the native tribes, if you will, on this land, is that they came together as a unit. It didn't happen quickly, but as they developed and interacted and they shared a similar language, when they developed the Confederacy that was recognized as the 5 nations and now 6 nations, they actually had a system which had never existed in any other part of the earth. They used a spiritual understanding based on nature, based on this creation as the teacher. And knowing that every situation that a human being would need to work through whatever the human's difficulties may be, whether it be medical, some illnesses, or even things that maybe had no description by symptoms, those ways that might be, let's say, a spiritual affliction, they had all of these things covered in how they came together. And they did utilize this, basically a spiritual foundation, as what they founded the basis for their form of government. So it really wasn't a religion. It's referred to within the Iroquois people, it's referred to as a way of life, because they understood that religions could be practiced and believed, but if you didn't live it, you didn't empower that element, that energy that it holds. So that is the basis for the Iroquois people and what they founded this form of government. It was not based on money or fame or royalty, and it was based on the basic characteristics of each individual who made up these, their leadership. And when you have real character of leadership, these are people who have insight to the spirit world, they have insight to this physical place, the planet, and all the elements that reside within that. And they knew how to work these things and develop that, which actually made them, I would say, more powerful than all of the residing native people around them.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the mistakes I think that us non-native people would make is when you talk about this League of Six Nations and the fact that these nations did come together, we think that there was a lot of common ground and a lot of similarity for that to happen. And reading the book, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like we had very distinct peoples here with very distinct sets of beliefs, and that it was actually a great deal of work for them to come together. It
was a great deal of work, and they didn't do it on their own. There was actually an individual who came into their area, and they noticed that these were really strong and good people, but they had a lot of infighting. Mm-hmm. They had this element of not being able to join together. So this individual, they refer to this individual as the peacemaker. And the peacemaker, in a sense, is this person or this entity that knows how to align groups of people and align them on a level beyond just the language and just their physical similarities, but showing them that if they did get beyond their little differences in the physical realm, that they could actually unite spiritually and bring them together, and it would form a very unique situation where they could become so powerful. But when I say the word powerful, it doesn't mean that they can come in and damage or destroy other life forms. It means powerful in the essence of they were working on behalf of, let's say, the Creator or the Great Spirit. So knowing that they were able to align themselves that way, they humbled themselves instead of becoming egotistical or arrogant and using that way to damage or hurt other life forms. They used that to actually unite even more people around them and they offered their services to actually protect other groups of Native peoples around them.
So, I mean, it's definitely fascinating, just the story of how they did come together. And Mason, I'll ask you, I mean, here, in New England, we don't get taught enough of the Native history in this area. It's kind of like we've shoved it off into a corner and we ignore it. We acknowledge it, but we don't really get into great depth about it. Was a lot of this new to you when you were working with Michael and putting together this book?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a great deal of it was. When I was a kid in New York State, we were taught just the superficialities of Iroquois history and society, but I don't know that it's ever been published. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's in our book. I mean, we drew on a lot of literary sources, but I couldn't find any real studies out there of the supernatural belief of the Iroquois. So yeah, it's definitely new.
And is it similar to like it is here when you're a paranormal researcher and a paranormal, somebody who chases down these ghost stories and writes about them, where you hear about these locations and you hear about the phenomena that goes on there, and it's attributed to, we're dealing with a Native American burial ground, or we're dealing with what was, sacred land to the Native Americans. Does that come across in a lot of the haunts that you have in your neck of the woods?
Well, probably the number one made-up explanation for psychic phenomena at allegedly haunted houses is Native American burial ground. It could have a lot to do with Stephen King, Pet Sematary and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, that's an avenue I always check out when I get a story about a haunted site, or even if I happen to be looking for, material in a region, is try to track down the sites of significance to Native Americans. Now, they're not all going to be burial grounds. They could be battlefields. They could be sacred sites. They could be ancient monuments. They could be natural sites that have sacred power, like springs, fountains, certain groves, valleys, waterfalls. But, it's quite common that there's a Native American connection to very contemporary psychic reports.
And Mike, when you're dealing with researching the history of this, I mean, I'm sure you must have to be aware, as you're putting this all together, how much of the non-Native influence must have come down into the history and into the storytelling of the people, because it was an oral tradition and it was passed along that way, and how much of it was affected by the so-called impartial observers that came over from Europe, and how much of it was impacted by them retelling the story as the years went on.
Well, there was a period of time where it was greatly affected, but one of the incredible things that was shared with me is that even if it seems as if it's been lost during some period of time, whether it's one generation or several, they always believed and understood that this information, these insights, would return without being able to explain it. And we've experienced several of those opportunities. And when that does happen, those people are accepted into the inner circles of the elders and the traditional people that are the practicing ones of the teachings. Those ones actually assist the ones that are seeking that information. But they call that, in their reference to why it just occurs, is because they hold this element so sacred that they don't abuse it and they won't dishonor it. So as a result, these insights seem to return unpredicted, unknowingly, and when they do return, it is very accurate to depict that they really haven't lost anything. And the reason why most people think, once it's lost, it never comes back. No, they've stayed in connection with what people will term the paranormal. I believe that within the Iroquois people, the ones that are holding on to this, to them, they view it as normal. So when we go through life accepting these things as normal, those experiences, and even ones that we can't explain, are still considered to be normal because they will assist us. If we give that time to develop and we work with other people who will also observe and share their insights, it makes so much sense and it gets clearer. And the people who hold these things, typically you would say, geez, if they've got an oral tradition, you're going to lose it. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't pick the village idiot to hold the history and these teachings. They picked people who had this inner ability to retrieve information, share that when it was verified, and they would say, obviously, we have to behave in a certain manner in order to maintain this and have this resurface with us. So that is actually one of the insights to how they have allowed this information to resurface. And it seems very appropriate at the time we're in that these things need to be shared.
Well, one of the things that you cover in the book, and it makes me wonder how much of a white or a non-native influence there was in the history of it, is the witch tales that come from the Iroquois. And it seems like a lot of it sounds similar to what we experienced here in Puritan New England, where those who are different, those who are more of nature, and those who are more somewhat, what we might consider to be pagan beliefs, more of worshiping the earth, they might have been deemed a witch, similar to how the Europeans would have done the same thing.
You're right. It's absolutely the same thing that is observed from certain positions, but when they start to look beyond that superficial category or that influence of thinking that it's something that's not positive, it's a dark energy. Well, energy is energy. Mm-hmm. And if you can influence that energy to give you some insight, if you can have it expose itself to what it really is attached to, you can actually trace it back to, and you can find that these are practitioners who have taken, let's say, the human element into consideration, and they want to become powerful. They want to use it to take out retribution or try to hurt other people. And when you really start to look at what this is, it's actually the very lower stages of that energy. And when you develop and get into the higher stages of the energy, those people protect themselves so that they can draw that other element out into the open. And if someone tries to send something their way, they can actually send it back, and it goes back with many times more the energy and the power and the intent that it was sent out with. So when it comes back, most times, I don't usually say this, but most times those individuals that have done this are very early in the stages of that practicing, and it ends up usually killing them.
But it definitely seems like it's similar to a lot of what we consider modern-day Wiccan beliefs, where whatever, you put out comes back to you tenfold type of thing.
Threefold.
Or threefold, whatever. It depends on how powerful people think it is.
Well, look at it this way. It's in every religion. Any religion where you start gaining the power, you're going to misuse it. It doesn't make a difference whether you believe in Gaia, the Earth Mother, or Buddha or Muhammad, or whatever. There are instances where people will misuse their power, period.
That's part of the human element.
Correct.
They tend to have this ability, and what we understand it to be is what people will refer to that as free will. The free will it can be a blessing, and it can also be a curse. If we violate the free will to the point where we start abusing it, it does have consequences. If we understand what the consequences are, I think if people really knew what the consequences that result from this, they wouldn't even venture near that. But because they're in the mindset of being in the physical life, that has been detached. They've detached themselves from this spiritual insight. And because of that, then they do navigate or go into these places where they probably shouldn't be going, because if they had that inner vision that would tell them, there's consequences for practicing in that manner, when you're not trying to assist and do what's right for. If you understand this by saying, what we want to do is every action or every behavior of our daily life should be for the highest good of all life. When we understand that and we keep that in mind daily, you don't even venture into that area, because there are consequences which people will be, I think, dramatically surprised that they have to deal with if they don't take care of it here.
Well, we are talking with Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield, the authors of Iroquois Supernatural, Talking Animals and Medicine People. And if you have any questions for the authors of the book, you can give us a call, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can email us spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can text us, 508-444-2661. Or you can just jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com, and all that information is up on the website to be able to get a hold of us during the course of the show. So feel free to call in with any questions. But Mason, when we're discussing this power and this ability to utilize this power and to bring it about, in some of the things that you research, some of the supernatural that you research in that area today, do you see what might be the lingering effects of that?
Oh, well, absolutely right. Today we've got a lot of famous TV psychics, and, I think probably a lot of them have got real talent. I don't think they could succeed like that if they didn't have talent. But I don't think they're right 100% of the time. And there's sort of the belief that a real good medicine person, at least of the Iroquois variety, which I know best, there's sort of the assumption out there in behind-the-scenes circles that if one of the great medicine people decided to do what someone like a John Edward or a Sylvia Brown does, that they would just blow them off the chart. And I've seen some instances myself where there was an awful lot of power displayed. But as Michael and as Michael's tutors have pointed out, if you want to see a show, get a ticket to the circus. Because the great healers, the great medicine people, they're not out there for display. What they're about is the message.
Yeah, it's almost like it wouldn't really make for a good segment on like Maury.
No. Well, it actually would. You just couldn't get one of them to do it.
That's true. All right, well, we do have a call on the line. Again, the numbers are 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast with Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. How are you?
Hi, crew, I guess. I am from central New York, and I only had one grandmother who was Onondaga, so I was persona non grata for the most part on the Onondaga land. But I have some questions and some comments, if I may.
Sure.
Well, have you been in touch? You have written this book about with the Keeper of the Flame.
Mrs. Mason, I personally am not in touch with the Keeper of the Flame.
Oh, did you ever meet Orrin Lyons, the former Keeper of the Flame?
I think Michael knows him pretty well.
Yes,
Orrin Lyons?
I know Orrin. Orrin is a great artist. In fact, I'm actually looking at a piece of his artwork right now. He did a depiction of a period of time when the Confederacy was just being formed, and there was an individual who they knew of who lived, I'm going to guess, somewhere near the Adirondacks, because there's a lot of stories that come out of that region. And this individual was known at that time as the evil Totadaho. He was today known as the Totadaho. He's the chief of chiefs.
Oh, yes, he supposedly had, like, Medusa, like snake for hair.
You got it.
Yes, sir.
And he was powerful. I mean, fearful powerful. And the people knew it. And there were stories that if you got within reach of his club, he would kill you, and he was cannibalistic. So people stayed away. But how they overcame that, he had such the reputation as being this powerful being, and I'm going to venture actually to say supernatural power, that when the peacemaker came into this area, he knew that they would have, at some time, have to confront or face this Totadaho. So
yeah, now I was told that he was Onondaga, and they were the toughest nut to crack in the Confederacy. His Iowanta and the Peacemaker they traveled about.
Yep.
Yes.
And the story of how they actually overpowered him is incredible. There was no physical battle. There was basically, I'm not even going to say a spiritual battle, but what the Peacemaker had done was he took those people who had the characteristics of leadership. Leadership really is not what we see today. The leadership that they understood were people who had a spiritual insight, but they had a spiritual insight that they could apply to our physical life. So when he explained to all of these leaders that they were going to go to meet this evil Totadaho, they were very hesitant, but he convinced them that if they went back and they made a small gift of their own making to bring up to this evil Totadaho, and they kept their distance and they approached very slowly, but as they got closer, they started to see his demeanor change. And as his demeanor changed, they one by one presented him with their gifts. And as they presented their gifts, they started to notice a tear coming down his face. Now, the Peacemaker is the one that spoke up, and he kind of wanted to use that situation to change things dramatically. So he kind of almost mockingly said, "What's the matter? Why are you crying?" And he realized by doing that, it would make everyone acknowledge this change of heart. And the Totadaho responded by saying, "No one has ever treated me this way." And he said, "I don't know what else to do."
It's wonderful. I had the honor of being able to speak with Chief Lyons. Is he still alive?
He is still alive.
Oh my God, he must be way
elderly.
up there.
Yeah.
Yes, and Chief Leon Shenandoah. And
he was the Totadaho, the last one before the one who's in there now. And I knew Leon really well. In fact, there's a story in the book about that. But this change of heart was shown to these leaders how you can do this without violence, how you can change someone's position. He turned from the evil Totadaho, and they now named him and asked him, with his revered reputation, to be their chief of chiefs. That's actually what that Totadaho means, is that he is the chief of chiefs. So they turned this thing, this powerful being that everyone feared, into their leader. And they say as they helped him and they groomed him and they helped him clean up, the snakes left his hair. They just exited, and they actually developed him into the top leader. That's the highest position a man can hold in the Iroquois Confederacy.
Yes, and for that, the Onondaga were made the keeper of the flame, the heart of the Confederacy.
You are absolutely right. It's
yes,
what they
now,
call...
Chief Lyons, I had a conversation once. I'm a Catholic Christian. I said, "You think the Peacemaker may have been Jesus?" And he goes, "Well, we don't know the year or the time, but it was a similar type of experience for the people."
The speculation is there. It's kind of nice, I think, to not really know, but to always hold that. It's a sacred event, so if we keep it sacred like that, it doesn't change anything, and it really doesn't lend anything to
I think it lends a lot. I think it all to the awe of it all, and the tree of life that was shown to them.
Not to infringe on anybody's beliefs either, but there are also, pre-Jesus, there are other Christ-like figures that also played similar roles in other people's too.
That's correct.
Oh, certainly, but this was just something I asked him, and he has an open heart and light, as do the nations. By the way, the ones I talked, they like to be referred to as Indians.
Yeah, typically when I've had that discussion a few decades ago. The ones that are the true practitioners, they typically they don't really care. But the ones that you talk with privately, the only reference that I've heard them say is they prefer Indians, and the reason they prefer Indians is they don't necessarily like the word American, that what this government has done around the world, they don't like that attachment of American to them, so they are very happy being referred to as Indian, but most of them, they're fine with the reference that, typically in the Six Nations, they prefer being called Mohawk or Seneca or Cayuga, whatever nation they're a part of.
Now, you're the Tuscarora. They were latecomers to guard the western flank of the Confederacy. Were they not from Virginia, West Virginia?
They were from the Carolinas. You're absolutely right.
They all came from the South after the Ice Age, of course. All the nations did. That's where the name
Who tells you that?
What's that?
I'm sorry, Mason?
Yeah, who tells you that? I mean, the origins are pretty confusing. But go on. I'd love to hear this gentleman's assertions and his evidence.
Oh, the land was the Ice Age. The land was there was nobody there, and I was told by Chief Shenandoah that their people came from the southern areas and worked their way up hunting as the meadows came about and the trees began to grow, and then they were, this was the land they settled in.
There's no doubt that there were migrations that took place. I think the question by some of the elders that I've spoken with is that they said, were there arrows pointing in which direction the migrations took place? So, you see, it depends on who's writing the history and who wants to apply whatever slant they do. But I think we're getting a little off the subject.
Yes, we're into the heart and soul of it. Now, they did keep their chain of lore unbroken until this very day, unlike the Wampanoag, which are basically trying to rediscover theirs, because they were so broken by their proximity to the European.
Right.
Well, I hate to cut you short, but we are coming up on the news break, so we do have to let you go. But thank you for calling in.
Yeah, thank you all.
All right, have a good night.
All right,
great.
Thank you.
And we are coming up on the news break, guys. Sorry, when we come back, we are going to spend a few minutes talking with Leanne Wilbur of the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, and then we'll give you guys a call back and get right back into the discussion. We have so much to cover coming up in the second hour. I want to talk about the Iroquois beliefs when it comes to ghosts. I want to talk about how some of these things might tie into UFOs, and especially the big deal for us here in the Spooky Studio and for a lot of our listeners and fans around the world is I want to talk about the little people and how it relates to some of the stories that we have up here with the little people, the Pukwudgies that we've talked about so many times on the show. So we'll be right back after the news. We'll talk to Leanne for a few minutes about an event coming up, and then I'll be right back into the discussion on Iroquois Supernatural with Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. Pick up the book. You can get it from SpookySouthcoast.com, Amazon.com, and wherever books are sold. We'll be right back following the news with more on Spooky South Coast.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420. WBSM, a Cumulus station.
From ABC News, I'm Daria Aldinger. Thousands of demonstrators rallied in New York's Washington Square Park today as the Occupy Wall Street movement entered a fourth week. This one was a peaceful gathering. Some of the past protests ended with arrests. This woman took part in an Occupy event in Washington, D.C.
I am completely disgusted with our political system and our economic system at the moment. And I've never been so worried about my country, ever.
There were protests in Charlotte, Austin, Los Angeles, and other cities. It started as an argument between two women at a Walmart near Baltimore. It ended with a whole lot more. Here's ABC's Sharon Reed.
A hazmat team was called to the suburban Baltimore Walmart after two arguing women allegedly began throwing chemicals at each other.
It was definitely bleach, and I'm not sure if it was ammonia mixed with the bleach that caused these injuries to the people inside the store.
Sean Vinson with the Baltimore County Police says 19 19 people were hospitalized, and County Fire spokesman Glenn Blackwell says the store was closed for hours.
Our crews did go in, they tested the air, they didn't have any levels of any ammonia or bleach in the store.
One of the women was arrested. Police say the two were involved in a continuing dispute. Sharon Reed, ABC News.
The parents of a missing 10-month-old girl from Kansas City are talking again to police. Lisa Irwin's parents had stopped cooperating a few days ago. Captain Steve Young says they're doing the right thing.
Something may jog their memory, you never know. They may think of another person, whatever. Their involvement in this investigation is critical.
The Irwins say their daughter was snatched from her crib after her mother put her to bed late Monday night. Georgia honoring a native son, a special Jimmy Carter exhibit opened today at the state's Museum of Agriculture.
During the time when cotton was phasing down and peanuts, thank goodness, were increasing in importance, I spent my early life working in the field, shaking peanuts, stacking peanuts, helping to thrash peanuts.
You're listening to ABC News.
Geico makes it so simple to save hundreds of dollars on car insurance. But why stop there? Geico finds every possible way to save you even more money. Good driver discounts, multi-car discounts, even good student discounts. And don't forget our looking fine discount, a discount for all the attractive folk like yourselves. Okay, there's not really a looking fine discount, just seeing if you're paying attention. It's not a bad idea, though.
For a free rate quote, visit geico.com to see how much you could save. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The Home Depot has a new lower price on top-rated Behr Premium Plus interior paint. 1-gallon cans now start at just $19.96 every day. It's the paint you trust, and it just got more affordable. So this weekend, you can take your living room from tired to inspired and your walls from white to bright. Then keep them that way, all thanks to Behr Premium Plus interior paint, now just $19.96. More saving, more doing. That's the power of the Home Depot. U.S. only. See store for details.
There were protests and counter-protests outside the Presbyterian Church of America's ordination of its first openly gay minister. A group best known for protesting at soldiers' funerals was upset about the ordination.
The Westboro Baptist Church is such a small minority, such a small fraction of the people of faith, in this country. And yet they seem to have this habit of trying to push people's buttons.
Michael Schuler, a Unitarian Universalist minister, leading the counter-protest. Nice parachute, as in golden parachute, the severance packages given to corporate bigwigs as they leave a job. ABC's Chuck Severson checked out what two mega bank chiefs got recently.
Amid the spreading demonstrations inspired by the Wall Street protesters.
This is about corporate greed, and we need to regulate the banks.
And with the flap about Bank of America's proposed $5 monthly fees for low-balance debit card users, an announcement that Sally Krawcheck and Joe Price, the two top Bank of America executives who were ousted last month, are getting hefty severance packages, $6 million and $5 million respectively. And the packages also include health coverage benefits for a year. Chuck Severson, ABC News.
Well, it looks like Paul McCartney's about to tie the knot again. A tent being set up, decorations being delivered to the former Beatles' home in London. British tabloids are reporting that McCartney and Nancy Chevelle will marry tomorrow. Mum's the word from the couple so far and their reps. This is ABC News.
Attention.
Atención.
Rosetta Stone invites you to be a part of its biggest language learning event in history. Because in 2011, we want to help 3 million people learn a new language. That's why we're going to give you an absolutely free demo of our language immersion technology. Call 1-800-559-5133. Developed to fully immerse you in your new language, the Rosetta Stone solution is easier than ever before. For your free demo, call 1-800-559-5133. 1-800-559-5133.
I'm Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Unfortunately, many people facing foreclosure believe they're on a one-way street.
How did I end up here?
Please take next exit.
What? But there is no exit.
It may not seem that way now, but I'm giving you the right directions to help you save your home from foreclosure.
Okay, talking to my GPS. I must really need help.
Facing foreclosure alone is stressful. That's why you need advice from a HUD-approved housing counselor. They offer expert, trustworthy advice that might help you avoid foreclosure no matter how difficult the situation seems.
It's difficult, all right.
And best of all, the advice is free.
Wow.
Now please exit this road you've been on for far too long.
Facing foreclosure? Don't go it alone. Get the right directions from a HUD-approved housing counselor today. For more information, visit www.hud.gov/fairhousing. That's hud.gov/fairhousing.
A public service message from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Anyone 55 and older and interested in adopting a cat for a $5 fee, Forever Paws Animal Shelter at 300 Linwood Street in Fall River is the place to go. Thanks to the Coalition for Animals of Greater New Bedford, they're implementing their senior-to-senior adoption program. Licorice and Merle are 2 adult cats that are available through this program. Licorice is a 7-year-old male cat with beautiful green eyes. He's sweet, loving, and affectionate, and gets along with other cats. Merle is a 10-year-old black and white female adult cat with pretty yellow eyes. She's quiet, affectionate, and like Licorice, gets along well with other animals. Let's make a difference in their lives. They both dream of being adopted into their loving home before the holiday season. For more information, call the shelter at 508-677-9154 or visit the website foreverpaws.com. Pictures of both cats can be viewed on the sites.
The NFL is back, and so are the Patriots. You'll hear every game and every play right here on AM 1420 WBSM.
Fires to the end zone. Leaping catch, touchdown!
Coach Belichick and Tom Brady have the team ready to take on the Jets, Ravens, Steelers, Colts, and the rest of the NFL. Patriots football is presented by Pilgrim Bank, Farmer Health, Fall River Ford, A&A Jewelers, and by Southcoast Hospital Systems on AM 1420 WBSM.
Hi, I'm Josh Holloway. Growing up near the Great Smoky Mountains, the national parks have always been a part of my life. They're living, breathing monuments to our nation's history and culture and need our care and support. I can't imagine a day when these natural treasures may not be around to enjoy, but years of underfunding, pollution, and climate change have taken their toll. So join me and the National Parks Conservation Association in ensuring our national parks are available for future generations. For more, visit preservetheparks.com.
Scam artists are trying to trick seniors into giving them their Medicare number.
I heard that. This happened to my friend. A man came to her door wanting to sign her up for the new Medicare program. Well, when she got her Medicare summary notice, it was full of charges for services she hadn't received. So I did something about it. I joined the Senior Medicare Patrol, where I teach others to protect their Medicare numbers, review statements to spot false charges, and report fraud.
Call 800-892-0890 or visit stopmedicarefraud.gov.
My name is Sue Smith. I'm 38 years old, and I work at a graphic design company. Which is funny, because I couldn't even draw a stick figure when I was a kid. But I met someone who told me, you know what? You can do anything if you really want to. And if the teenage me were here, she'd tell you,
I wouldn't be into drawing and art if it wasn't for big brothers, big sisters. Most kids from my neighborhood don't get into art. They get into trouble. But I was lucky because my big sister showed me early on that I didn't have to be like most people. And to the young me,
that meant a lot. My big sister's name is Sheila, and Sheila is the reason that this 8-year-old grows up to have an amazing job as a graphic designer.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child, and that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hello.
Hey man, you up?
No.
Wake up, I need to talk to you. I think your house is haunted.
Hey, come on, it's 2:30 in the morning.
I can't sleep in here, man. I'm scared.
All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. We're going to get right back into the discussion about Iroquois Supernatural in just a few minutes with our guests Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. But before that, we do have a couple of things that we want to tell you about, a couple events coming up. One more time, Haunted History Night is coming up this Saturday at the Fearing Tavern in Wareham. It's your chance to investigate a tavern built in 1690. dinner, lectures, so much more. Just go to SpookySouthcoast.com to get your tickets. And also, the Friends of Dighton Rock Museum will host Stories of the Bridgewater Triangle by John Brightman tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. at the museum located at Dighton Rock Park, Bayview Avenue. It'll be open to the public from 1 to 3 p.m. if you wish to visit. And now joining us on the line is the proprietor and I guess we can say the axe murderess in charge over at the Lizzie Board and Bed and Breakfast. Leanne Wilbur is joining us on the phone. Matt, if you want to bring her up. And we are going to talk about something that's coming up this Thursday that sounds pretty neat, pretty exciting, just in time for Halloween, Leanne.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I got this call yesterday morning, and they wanted to do this at Lizzie Borden's, and I said, well, I'm limited for space here, so I made a couple of calls, and the Eagle, which is located at 35 North Main Street here in Fall River, has agreed to donate the space for the evening this coming Thursday. Are you familiar with the name Houdini?
Oh, I am. I definitely, and I think most of our listeners probably know about Harry Houdini, who was the famous illusionist, magician, and escape artist. But you've got somebody pretty cool coming to town.
Well, yes, I do. He is the great-great-nephew of Harry Houdini. His name is Aaron Houdini, and he will be performing at the Eagle this coming Thursday, October 13th at 8 p.m. Doors will open at 7. He's a magician and escape artist, just like his great-uncle. And tickets are $20 at the door, and half of the proceeds will go to a local charity. But he has been gracious enough to come here. He wanted to see the house. So I got a message yesterday morning. He wanted to come here and do a performance, and I said, that's wonderful, but if anybody wants to attend this, I've got limited space. So, like I said, the Eagle has been kind enough to donate their space for the evening.
All right, and of course, now anybody who knows the Houdini legacy knows how he felt about psychics and about seances. So, if Liz decides to go over there, you might want to warn her that she's dealing with somebody from the Houdini line.
Well, it's interesting. Checking up on learning about Aaron in the past few days, he is interested in the paranormal.
Excellent. I know that he's always popping up at different paranormal conventions and different events around the country. You can follow him on Facebook, as I do. And he definitely does seem to be a good friend of the paranormal community, unlike Great Uncle Harry.
So I'm going to have fun talking with him when I get to meet him. But yes, it's going to be an interesting evening, and I hope everyone listening can attend.
All right, again, that's this Thursday, October 13th at the Eagle, 35 North Main Street in Fall River at 8 p.m. Tickets are $20 at the door, which will open at 7 p.m. So if you want to check that out, you can just go on Facebook and find Leanne and find Lizzie Board and Bed and Breakfast there, and you'll get all the information there, as well as on Aaron Houdini's page. That's ARON Houdini. And how are things at the house, Leanne? Doing pretty well?
Things have been very interesting. Can't wait for you and Matt to come back and to investigate. The house has been a little perturbed since a certain group was here a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if Matt told you about my fly incident.
Oh, he did. It sounds very Amityville-like.
It was beyond Amityville-like, but I did take photographs of it and video. And prior to that, I had an incident where the lights were going on in the house, and I knew I had shut them off, and I looked out and saw a light on the third floor, so I went back into the house and turned that light off to go turn the light off. And I get up to the third floor, and all the lights are on. So I shoot them all off very carefully, and I leave the house, come back out to the office, and a little while later, I look back out at the house because I heard a noise outside on the street, and all the lights on the third floor are on again. So I called up a friend of mine, and I had her on the phone while I went back into the house because I wasn't sure at that point if someone was in the house just messing with me and turning the lights on. And I made sure all the doors were locked. I went through every floor, checked every closet, under the bed. No one else was in the house, but all the lights were back on the third floor.
Well, I can't explain that, but I think I can explain the flies.
Oh, really?
Yes, I heard that Zach Baggins left some of his hair gel behind. And they were drawn to it, and it just got stuck. All right. Well, again, everybody, if you want to check out Aaron Houdini, that'll be at the Eagle Thursday, 8 p.m. Doors open at 7. Tickets are $20. Leanne will be there. You'll get a chance to meet her, talk with her, and find out more about the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you can come back and talk with us for a whole show sometime soon. Or we'll go there, and we'll see you.
Oh, sounds like fun. Definitely.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
All right. Happy Halloween if I don't talk to you before then.
You too.
Bye-bye. That is Leanne Wilbur. You know her from the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, and you'll be seeing her coming up on Ghost Adventures real soon. So we can't, I don't think we can reveal the date yet because they keep a lot of these episodes secret as to when they're going to air, but just follow Zach on Twitter. He lets you know a couple days in advance of where they're going to be. All right. Moniz is trying to give it away. We actually turned off his mic so he couldn't. All right, go ahead. You can say it.
The 21st.
Okay. You may have just committed some sort of violation of our contract. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Iroquois Supernatural with our guests, Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. We're going to find out about ghosts. We're going to find out about UFOs, and we're even going to talk a little puckwudgie before the night is over. So stick around. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
AM 1420 WBSM with a brand new show every other Wednesday from 1 till 2. It's the MIH Radio Show with hosts Jeremiah and Franchise. Interesting guests, local events and happenings, the arts, social media, and more. The MIH Radio Show is sponsored in part by Advanced Eye Centers. Advanced Eye Centers, focused on your results. The MIH Radio Show, every other Wednesday afternoon at 1 on AM 1420 WBSM.
I see a great need in my community.
So Richard Washington set out to meet that need by working with youth in the juvenile justice system, joining thousands of other volunteers. If you're 55 and older, you can use the skills that help you through a lifetime of learning, giving, teaching, and working. Go to getinvolved.gov or call 1-800-424-8867 to find out how you can volunteer, impact your community, and make our country stronger.
Retired people have a lot to offer because we have life experience.
What are you going to do with your lifetime of experience? Go to getinvolved.gov today or call 1-800-424-8867. We have so much to offer, and our nation needs us. Make a difference for generations. This message is brought to you by the Corporation for National and Community Service.
Hi, my name's Bob. Hi, Bob. I see this ad on TV. Says I can reduce my debt by 50%. I call, they told me to stop paying my bills, stop talking to my creditors. They'd take care of everything.
I gave them thousands, but most of it went to their fees.
Getting out of debt is neither quick nor easy. There are those who will tell you anything to win your trust.
I'm more in debt now because the fees and interest on my cards kept piling up.
Talk to your creditors directly, or to find a nonprofit agency near you, visit debtadvice.org. This has been a public service message.
This heavyweight bout is about to begin. The challenger wears white trunks with a blue stripe, and the champ is wearing, looks like an examination gown from the doctor's office. And from the back, we can... Ooh, that's not pretty. Champ, what's with the crazy getup?
I've got to take care of my family.
Yeah, so?
Well, when you love your family, you got to go in and get those important medical screenings. A lot of potentially deadly diseases can be treated if you catch them in time.
So you wear the examination gown because...
Because I'm a real man. Real men take care of their families and get those tests. Real men wear gowns.
Okay, champ, good luck. Here we go. The champ's not wasting any time. It's over. This fight is over. Champ, you barely broke a sweat. Any words for your fans out there?
Remember, go to ahrq.gov for a list of the tests they need to get and when to get them.
What was that web address again?
ahrq.gov. And remember, real men wear gowns.
Go to ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, AHRQ, and the Ad Council.
We are the shadow mental health system in America, unheralded and unsung.
Dr. Joyce Berland of the National Alliance on Mental Illness says that families provide 50% of the care for people with mental illness.
And the families are the ones that are, taking to medication, taking to this, taking to that, going after their family members in jail, trying to get them out of jail. It's a real firing line that families live.
Many times, families feel isolated.
Support groups have been spontaneous reactions to that isolation. Support is a human necessity.
Be a moral support for families dealing with mental illness. For more, visit the website shadowvoices.com. For free information on families coping with mental illness, call 800-999-3534. A message from the Mennonite Churches and Faith and Values Media.
AM 1420, WBSM, is a proud sponsor of the second annual Sharon's Walk to benefit the Southcoast Centers for Cancer Care. Sharon's Walk happens Sunday, October 23rd at the beautiful Fort Taber in New Bedford. Last year, more than 900 walkers joined in the first Sharon's Walk. This year, there's room for even more. Registration fee is only $15 per person, and you can walk individually or as part of a team. Sign up early and get your free commemorative t-shirt. Register online at WBSM.com. Sharon's Walk, to benefit the new Southcoast Centers for Cancer Care. Sunday morning, October 23rd at New Bedford's Fort Taber.
This is the story of Daniel, who was born 2 months early. His lungs weren't ready. His heart wasn't ready. His parents could only hope that one day he would leave the hospital healthy, and they would all live happily ever after. Daniel's is just one of the more than 500,000 stories of babies born prematurely last year. You can help the March of Dimes stop premature birth and bring more babies home healthy. Learn how at marchofdimes.com. Working together for stronger, healthier babies.
Major League Baseball players are getting in on the action.
Hi, I'm Michael Young.
I'm Chris Young.
I'm Carlos Pena, and we're getting in on the action.
Thousands of high school students across the country are getting in on the action by volunteering in their communities. Action teams of high school students are joining Volunteers of America and Major League Baseball players to help train and inspire the next generation of volunteers.
It's easy to start an action team at your school, so you too can get in on the action. Are you in?
Log on to actionteam.org. Are you in?
Hi, I'm Josh Holloway. Growing up near the Great Smoky Mountains, the national parks have always been a part of my life. They're living, breathing monuments to our nation's history and culture and need our care and support. I can't imagine a day when these natural treasures may not be around to enjoy, but years of underfunding, pollution, and climate change have taken their toll. So join me and the National Parks Conservation Association in ensuring our national parks are available for future generations. For more, visit preservetheparks.com.
It blew books off shelves from 20 feet away and scared the socks off some poor librarian.
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky South Coast is back.
This looks extraordinarily bad.
Who's bad?
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. We are talking about Iroquois Supernatural, Talking Animals and Medicine People, the new book by Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. It's by Bear & Company, Rochester, Vermont. BearandCompanyBooks.com is the website for the company. And Michael and Mason, do you guys have a website for promoting the book?
Helps if you actually
put
them on.
Yeah, Matt's got to put him on the air. He's playing with his phone. I'm sorry.
And you
just cut off? Yep. It's like the night I was left in charge of things. We'll get Mason right back on the air. Let me just give you that information. But Michael, do you guys have a website that you're using to promote the book?
Well, I don't. Mason does. I'm in the dark ages. It's too much of a distraction.
Sure.
And as Mason has mentioned, that in order to live this experience, you kind of have to know where to draw lines and not introduce too much distraction, because it does become a distraction, and those things can alter and interfere with how far we need to go. And I don't want to have any barriers or any interference that is going to disrupt the work that I've been doing. So as a result, I do keep pretty private, but when it's necessary to come out and speak on the things, then I will do that.
I'm glad that you did so with us here tonight. Mason, you do have a website where people can find out more about the book?
Yeah, it's masonwinfield.com.
And it's linked up with SpookySouthCoast.com, and people can get the book, I'm assuming, in bookstores everywhere and from Amazon and wherever else books are sold?
Yes, they can.
I think that's a safe bet.
All right. Now, Mason, let me ask you some of the more interesting tales of ghosts that come from the Iroquois. I mean, what were some of the, as somebody who writes about these for a career and somebody who's researched so many different types of ghost stories, what kind of themes did you see running through the ghostly tales of the Iroquois?
Well, for one thing, I have to say that some of the most poetic, inspiring ghost tales and visions I've ever heard have come from Michael. But, you know, the Iroquois concept of a ghost is very much closer to that of the parapsychologist. I mean, today's parapsychologist, I mean, somebody who's studied and has a degree, not just somebody that says they're a parapsychologist, but they don't really operate with the theory that a ghost, an apparition, is a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, they really don't think that. It's an apparition. That's all you know about it. And when you look at the Iroquois stories and reports of ghosts, they very seldom personify the ghost. You know, it's almost like they perceive a ghost to be some part of the human organism, if you will. I mean, maybe even part of the psyche that comes back, and it occasionally appears in places that might have been relevant to the living individual. However, that apparition that comes back is not necessarily the thinking, reasoning, feeling part of the being. I mean, that part of the human being is off to its destination, whether that's with the good-minded spirit or whether it's a period of turmoil and further growth. So I hope I've answered your question directly, but yeah, the Iroquois conception of a ghost is not that of TV.
Well, and it seems like, you know, every culture has a word for ghost, but they all define it differently. Mike, how would you describe a ghost from the Iroquois perspective?
Well, Mason did mention that we have a tendency to personify entities or things that we understand can come from the spirit world. But within the spirit world, that realm is so far beyond the concept of a human mind that they have been able to determine and tell when an entity or a presence has either occupied or been human or been in the physical realm, and the ones that haven't. And it's not something that is discernible by science or religion, but that's why the understanding of when they take this concept, when they look at this creation, to them it differs so much from Christianity because there is no death in their perception of this life. The physical realm does maybe end at a biological level, but they know that the humans and all the life they contain so many more elements than just physical and biological. And that's why there's no real good explanations in I think, any camp that tries to address this. And a lot of times it's so sacred to those who understand it that they step back from it. They won't give their version or their rendition because they say that these are beings that if we need to call upon them, if we need their assistance, we can't be dabbling. We can't be toying with it. We need to approach it from such a sacred place that we know with confidence that they will come to the assistance. And so calling it, like you say, ghost or spirits, it's probably a designation that people try to refer to so that there's some reference point. But as we know it, those reference points are so difficult to pin down and to convey to other people. It's almost like trying to explain, let's say, the color red to a person who's never been sighted. You would really struggle at trying to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get into these realms, it is shared amongst those people that are the practitioners and can access that. But they do it so solemn and so sacredly, and they know that this is something that is not for light of heart, and people who are not willing to dedicate not just a portion of their life, they dedicate their whole life. And when it becomes your whole life, everything else can become a distraction. So it really is something that you need to stick with and gain the confidence of and work within it. And many times, if they're going to be bringing in some element that is not been human, you need to do it collectively. You can't do these things as individuals. So I try to caution people who have interest not to dabble or go out on their own to try those things. And I know you mentioned early little people, and the remarks that I've heard from some of these people who are in the society, they actually will say things like, they're not all good.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to go venturing into this with first taking some precautions to protect yourself.
Well, I definitely want to get more into the little people a little bit later on the show. I'm teasing it because it is a big topic of discussion here on Spooky Southcoast when we talk about our Wampanoag versions here of the little people and the Pukwudgies. But when discussing the ghosts, obviously you're giving us an idea of how the Iroquois view it in a literal sense, but also in a metaphorical sense and in somewhat of a folklore sense. You identify in the book that there are 5 different motifs to some of the ghost stories that we hear come from the Iroquois.
Well, absolutely right. As the researcher, the guy who tried to expose himself to all the published material. I mean, Michael lived life. I'm just sort of the academic side of it. Yeah, I did want to clarify that those were the sources of our ghost stories,
mm-hmm.
and we had a relatively short chapter considering the amount of material that is out there. You could do a whole book on Iroquois or Iroquois and Algonquin Native American ghosts in New York State. You could do that easily. It'd be a huge book.
But then, to some degree, though, in that regard, would they be ghost stories, or would they be, more of their beliefs as Mike was just discussing? Are we talking more of the folklore, or are we talking more of the actual belief system?
Well, if you could get Iroquois people to talk to you,
mm-hmm.
Not always the easiest thing to do. I can't calculate the number of ghost stories you would be able to, reports, you would be able, eyewitness experiences, you would be able to pick up not only from our day, but if you could have spoken, think of the generations since the whites have been here. You go back 400 years. Think of all the material that's lost, that's completely unobtainable, because it was never published, it was never written down. That's sort of one of the mistakes Michael and I didn't want to see happen
mm-hmm.
with our generation was we didn't want stuff to be lost. We wanted it to be written down, and so that somebody in the future could get it.
Well, one of the things that I want to ask you about, and either of you could probably answer this question, is was wondering about the UFO connections to some of these Iroquois stories and some of their traditions, because we hear a lot of UFO tales, different fire in the sky, different things sighted in the sky from the Pueblo, from the Aztec, and from the Mayans. We hear these stories come out from these peoples. Do the Iroquois have a tradition of UFO type reports and UFO phenomena?
Yes, they do, but they also have a creation myth or a creation story that starts with a woman descending from what they refer to as they call it Sky World. And when people use references to places, it's hard to do the translation from the languages of the native people to English. There are some words that just are not translatable. So to the best of someone's ability, they would pursue trying to find out, well, give me a little bit more information. They would find out that it gets to a place where it's beyond the ability of the English language to clearly give you that image. So the thing of saying UFOs being a part, well, UFOs, yes, because in the sense that they talk about this person and these places from outside of the Earth's existence. And when you do that, obviously it's making a reference to UFOs, because how can we identify it if we don't have a reference to say, oh, we know what that is? So it is, but again, it's up to whoever observes this to put it into a context that they can perceive and then say, okay, this part, what they may have seen, may have been a UFO. Some other things may be energy that exist, and they may be things that are maintaining a balance. That balance can be anything from environmental to spiritual, and anything even beyond that. I believe there are realms that have not even been identified yet, and I think as we get further down the road, things will get clearer as we get past this barrier that they're all indicating 2012, but I think that we will start to see more insights become available, and we will start to identify and be able to work with those other realms.
Well, and of course, Michael, you mentioned the inability to translate some of those tales into English words, and maybe lost in that translation would be the answer to a lot of these mysteries that we're talking about. Maybe the Iroquois did know the answer to some of these things. But before we get into the discussion about the little people, I'll throw out the phone numbers again if anybody wants to call in. 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Those are the numbers if you'd like to chat with Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield. They are the authors of Iroquois Supernatural. And also you can jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com or email us SpookyCrew@SpookySouthcoast.com. And however you need to get your question to us, we will ask it of the gentleman that we have with us. And when I started reading through the book, and I'm reading through a lot of these tales of the Iroquois, when I got to the chapter on the little people, all of a sudden, I just stopped. And I wanted to call or text Chris Balzano at that point and find out if he was that far into the book yet. And it turns out he was all over this. The connections that are made amongst so many tribes and amongst so many native nations with these little people, and the Iroquois seem to have a very good reverence for these, a very strong reverence for these creatures. But like you said earlier, they're both good and bad.
Yes, the reason we may think or refer to them as bad, they're really not bad, but they have the ability to be tricky. They can actually start to interfere with people, but it's usually on a level that is trying to help someone discover or actually find that there are other elements that we should be dealing with. And again, sometimes they're in places that they're trying to caution us not to go into. And, I don't want to get too specific because this is another area of, it almost overlaps with the false faces, with the little people. And these are beings that they hold so sacred that they really try to just give reference to for people, so that if you ever encounter things like this, that there are some things that we can do to actually appease them or to help them and encourage them not to be so tricky. And when I use that word tricky, that's kind of a key word for some of the elders and the medicine people that are cautioning you. You may not want to engage with these beings because you're really in no way able to compete on that level with them. Mm-hmm. Unless you have been from a long time in life, have interaction and know how to deal with those things. That's why they really don't go too far into it. I can say that in the years that I was hanging out with Mad Bear, he actually had the skull of a little people. And
wow.
It was discovered while they're digging one of the canals across New York State. And he said it was so rarely used. He said it was only on very special occasions that they would bring that out and have a ceremony with that skull. But when I saw that, I didn't believe it was real. And then Mad Bear held it in his hand and he showed it to me and he said, there's a full set of teeth. He said you can see it's bone, it's human. He said it was about the size of an appliance light bulb, but it had all the full features of human. And he said they had discovered all of the remains while excavating one of the canals across the state. He said the work crew, the stories were handed down that discovered this. They freaked so bad they never came back to the work site. They had to remove the bones and then hire new crews to come in. And actually it was the Onondagas that took possession of that. It was in their territory that it was discovered. But when I saw that, it confirmed to me, because, you know, we hear stories, but we're almost wanting and needing to see something that confirms the story to us. And when I did see it, I knew that there was a reason why Mad Bear would bring things out like that, because he had confidence and trust, but he also knew that we need more than just faith. We need to see things for ourselves so that we can actually convey this and tell people they're real. And they're not only real, they're a part of this life that most people may not want to accept, because there's been so many generations that have detached from these elements in this life. And I think it's the right time, I think it's a good time for us to actually help people get a little familiar with these elements again, so that they can start to grow spiritually. They can grow in so many other levels that they need help. And that's one of the, I'm hoping one of the missions of the book is to give people some more insight that will help them develop in this life.
Well, there was a mummy, a small body that was about 18 inches tall at the most, found in the Midwest in a cave that had the full set of...
Wyoming.
Casper,
this is Mason. That was Wyoming.
That's correct. And although it has since disappeared, so there is other evidence of these little people being around. So,
and
there's world folklore. I mean, whatever they are, these or at least reports of these beings have appeared apparently indigenously all over the world. Not only that, we're fairly positive that little people traditions among the Iroquois considerably predated the arrival of the Europeans, because there are like 1,000-year-old plus burials, Iroquoian burials, that are found with these miniature weapons and implements, and at least that's interpreted as being a sign that whoever rested there might have been a member of the society devoted to the little people.
Right, and what is out in Indonesia? They have the Meriawan, which are these little tiny people that are about 10 inches tall. You're right, they're found around the world.
And he's actually...
Yeah, traditions of them are.
Yeah.
Furthermore, what's so interesting about little people traditions all over the world is that they've got commonalities. Just about... And the commonalities are basically on 3 points. One is that everywhere little people are found in the world, they are associated with the processes of nature.
Correct.
They are of the natural world. It's almost as if they help the natural cycles run. Another characteristic of them is that in some fashion or another, little people everywhere are associated with the human dead. It's not like they it's like when you die, you become a little person. I mean, it's not that literal. It's more as if the little people and the human dead are from the same realm, and they sort of, come in contact with each other. But thirdly, little people everywhere in the world tend to be associated with human children. They've got some interest in human children. Human children see them, and it's not always a cool situation.
Agreed. You got the stories of fairies. Now, fairies, according to original folklore, they weren't exactly something you messed with. They were pretty fearsome, even though they're supposedly small. Same thing with gnomes and sprites and elves. If you want to go into the European traditions, the Asians have a number of different types depending upon what part of Asia you're looking into. Yes, it's cross-pollinated around the world.
Yeah, and I believe the term fairies is really not appropriate because we seem to have an image that we attach to a word like fairy. And I mean, gnomes and these other beings that we know exist, they're not to interfere with the human in the life that they are choosing to follow in the physical life. But they can actually prevent people from going into certain areas and not allow disruption to occur on some of these sacred sites.
Well, but you do reference in the book a few times, you do reference the Fae realm as being somewhat similar to these creatures. I mean, they do seem to come in and out of existence. They do seem to appear and disappear, especially some of these stories of them canoeing down the river. They seem to materialize out of nowhere.
Yeah,
they're tricky.
Well, it's because it's one of the powers that humans really are not using that is one of their possibilities. And because we've been so manipulated and influenced by a system that will not allow people to go into these areas without ridicule, that's what holds many people back, is that they are afraid of being viewed as crazy or out of sorts, that they don't want to go there, so they just accept the norm that is, well, those are just stories. This is just folklore. They don't really exist. And yet, I had a personal experience. I didn't see them because we were in the Ozarks. It was middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning. Mad Bear woke up and he said, "Where are we?" I said, "Somewhere in the Ozarks." He says, "Well, let's go get some sleep." He says, "The next motel you see, let's pull in." So we pulled in. I'm unpacking the car and getting Mad Bear into the room, and he's in the bathroom. I'm getting stuff set up. I close the door, and I hear this sound that I've never heard in my life before. It sounded similar to children, but a much higher pitched voice. And the closest that I can try to get to that, it was just like just tiny little high-pitched voices. And I went over to Mad Bear at the door at the bathroom. I said, "Mad Bear, there's something going on strange out here." And he came out, he heard it, and he said, "That's little people." He said, "They really like it if you give them food." He said, "You know our leftover dinner, the chicken and biscuits." He says, "Lay a napkin out under one of the trees," and he said, "Place the food on it," and he said, "Come back in." Now, when he initially said that, it kind of struck me in a way, because the influence of we should fear the unknown. I was thinking to myself, why me? But I went out there and I put the food out, and then I just came back in, and sure enough, we heard that sound again. And he said, "Wait a few minutes." He says, "Give him 15, 20 minutes." He says, "We'll go." He says, "Go check." So I went out. It got quiet. I went out. Absolutely no food left on that napkin. And he said they really appreciate when you give them things like that, and they're in a place where they're very prevalent. He said, so by honoring them, he said it appeases them not to cause difficulties or troubles with people. So it started showing me that in order to work within these parts of life, we have to get comfortable. If we're not comfortable, and we're not only comfortable but assertive to hold your space, you're going to be struggling throughout this life. And those were things that built confidence and reassured me that some things that we can research, we can do on our own. But much of this, it needs to be done on a collective basis. We need to share this with other people who have these common interests and do it and actually remind them this is a sacred mission. And if we can do this in a sacred way, we will see things be revealed to us.
Well, I think these little people that we've been talking about here, and we talked about the Pukwudgie here, or the Jungi, I believe is how it's pronounced, with the Iroquois. But an interesting part of the book is you mentioned of these little people, there are kind of subgenres of them. And one of them that you mentioned is the plant growers. And they have a connection to strawberries, which I thought was very interesting because if anybody remembers the episode of Paranormal State where they were dealing with what they thought was a Pukwudgie, and they called our good friend and content director Chris Balzano to to help this family deal with what they thought was a Pukwudgie. Some of the advice that they, not Chris, gave to the family was to plant a strawberry patch in the backyard, and that might appease these creatures. So I'm wondering if we're seeing some cross-pollination of the stories between these little people, these little trickster people of the different nations.
That's exactly what you're seeing. It's a cross-pollination that is actually helping other people become familiar, so that when you start to see that these things really are not designed to harm us, but they're also not designed for us to kind of domesticate them or take them in as a pet, that we need to understand what is the purpose for their existence and what is our purpose to deal with them. How are we to interact with these elements? And I believe the Iroquois really have a great grasp on all of these areas. It's just that they don't come out openly with it because they do respect it to that level of sacredness, that they don't want to diminish. And here's one of the areas that someone might ask, well, how much can you reveal? No one really knows that. And the reason why you would ask that question, how much can you reveal, before you lose the gift, before you lose your ability to keep working and interacting with this. And no one wants to venture near where that may be, because it's not something that is granted to every person on the planet. And if you have been fortunate and blessed with that opportunity, you hold that so dearly that you will not venture near that, risking that ability to interact.
We do have
this is Mason.
Sorry, go ahead,
interjecting. You know, Michael doesn't reveal everything he knows. I think it's important to point out he's been entrusted with some material that he knows is not to be let out, and he doesn't let it out. And when I know that something is sacred to the Iroquois, I mean, really private, I don't let it out either. But I think that's important to point out that our book is just surface level, and there's so much else that you know, if you got an Iroquois elder out there, look out. If they would be willing to talk, but none of them would.
Well, one question that I do want to have addressed here before, and we only have a few minutes left in the show, but Chris is in the chat room. Chris Balzano, the Pukwudgie researcher, and you know, researches many other things, but he did point out that you do use the word fae in relation to these little people in the book, and he points out that that does have a decidedly evil connotation in a lot of folklore. So was that intentional, or was that just kind of a broad generalization for these creatures?
Well, this is Mason. I'm curious where he gets his insight, because the word fae doesn't always mean that. On the other hand, of course not. I mean, you know, we realize that the Judeo-Christian societies we've been brought up in, I mean, just it's the language, culture, everything, tends to be dualist. It's good or it's bad. You know, it's light or it's dark. And so a lot of things get stereotyped as being negative when they're simply outside the mainstream. So, no, I certainly didn't intend anything like that. I mean, the word fae has multiple derivations, and frankly, I don't think the roots of the word are evil. I mean, the fair folk, that's where we get our fairies from.
Mm-hmm.
That means good, beautiful, kind. So, no, it certainly was not with any intent to cast negative aspersions.
All right. Well, again, the book is called Iroquois Supernatural, Talking Animals and Medicine People. Michael Bastine and Mason Winfield are the authors. You can pick it up wherever books are found, on Amazon.com and on SpookySouthcoast.com as well. And I highly recommend it. It's the most insight that you're going to get from a Native American people and from some of their beliefs in the supernatural. And as we've been talking all night long, it's hard to get them to share. So even though they didn't, Michael Bastine wasn't able to share all that he knew, he still gave us quite a bit. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. And hopefully, you've mentioned that there are potential for other books, so hopefully there'll be some follow-ups, and you can come back and join us to discuss some more.
Thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Have a good night, and have a great holiday season, as we call it here when it's October.
Nice show. Thank you.
All right, good night.
Good night.
And just a reminder to everyone, again, one more time, Haunted History Night 2011 is coming up this Saturday night in Wareham, Massachusetts. You get to investigate the Fearing Tavern, built in 1690 and expanded upon over the years. But it's where else can you get into a building that's that old, that's seen every single day of this country's history, was already almost 100 years old when this country was born. So you're going to get the chance to investigate that, the one-room schoolhouse, the Old Methodist Meeting House, and the Union Chapel. These are buildings from the mid-1700s and the early 1800s. You're going to get dinner prepared by the Spooky Crew, at least as of right now. And you're going to get to hear lectures from Jeff Belanger, who you know is the author of so many books, including the new revised edition of The World's Most Haunted Places, as well as being the host of 30 Odd Minutes and the researcher and writer of Ghost Adventures. You're going to get to hear from Andrew Lake, the author of the new book Ghost Hunting Southern New England. You're going to hear from myself. We're going to share with you evidence that we've captured in the Fearing Tavern in the past, because we are amongst the very small group of investigators who have been allowed in the tavern. We were the first ever allowed into the tavern. And these other three buildings, no one has ever investigated. This is going to be the first time anyone has ever gone in there looking for signs of the paranormal. So it's going to be a great night. Tiffany Rice is going to join us. She's going to give a mini gallery reading during dinner, as well as join us in the investigation. A lot of people don't remember that little fact about Tiffany, but aside from being a spirit medium, an amazing spirit medium, she's also quite an accomplished paranormal investigator too. So we're going to get the chance to investigate alongside her as well at the Fearing Tavern and these other buildings. So tickets are only $99, and a portion of that goes to helping the Wareham Historical Society keep these buildings running, keeping these buildings as historically accurate as possible. And it's going to be a great night. So join us, please. Go to www.spookysouthcoast.com/event, or just go to our website, spookysouthcoast.com, and click on the logo for Haunted History Night 2011 and purchase your tickets. They are still available. Please do so as fast as you can, because we need to get a dinner count going. Matt's going to go home and start making this stuff right now. He's only got about a week left. So definitely get on board. There's going to be seasoned paranormal investigators there. There's going to be first-time investigators there. We're even going to be celebrating a few birthdays at Haunted History Night 2011. So check it out. It's going to be a great time. And really, where else can you see so many great people at one time? All of our friends who are coming on this event with us, people who purchased tickets, they're all great people. Most of them we know. Most of them we've already worked with at other events over the years. So you're going to have a great time. Highly recommend it. SpookySouthcoast.com is where to go. So until next week, when Chris Balzano will host the show, we want you all to stay spooktacular.
Talk and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420. WBSM, a Cumulus station.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. There's heavy fighting still in the battle for the hometown of ousted Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. NATO airstrikes will continue, says a British official visiting Libya. The BBC's Jonathan Heads in Sirte talking with civilians who are fleeing.
For the remaining civilians in Sirte, there are two options: stay and fight or flee. After days of living under constant bombardment, families are getting out when they can. Our houses, even our children, are being blown up, said this man.